Okay, Mr. Vey, we are.
Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Thursday, June 18th, 2020 Board of Education meeting. With that, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if I could ask everybody to stand and start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the United
of the
States
United
of America
States of America,
and to the
and
republic
to the republic
for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
for a second. Okay. With that, we're into the regular meeting here. We already approved the agenda as presented at our before our executive session. Excuse me? Okay, so we approved the agenda as presented before our executive session meeting. So we'll go back to the regular meeting, and our first item on the agenda is public comment, correct, Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, I'll open the public comment period. I would just like to remind residents they're always welcome to come and speak at board meetings. Being Zoom wise, we ask that if you do, community members email Jeff B. Veronica at westeronequate.monroe.edu by 3 p.m. of the day of the meeting if you wish to speak, so we can have you added to the agenda. So to ensure respect of process of people and process involved, the board requires the speakers to adhere to the following conditions. Make no comments related to personnel matters. Written statements related to personnel matters can be submitted to Ms. Kelly, the district clerk. We ask that you please state your name, address for the record, and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We also ask that your comments be respectful, relevant, and timely. Comments that are restatements of previous views or made by the same speaker, personal attacks or allegations could result in the speaker being asked to stop in the code of conduct. So with that, I'll ask Dr. Johnson, is there anybody that speaks this evening?
Yes, we do. We have somebody to speak.
Okay, can we let our speaker in?
We've let him in, John.
Okay, welcome to the Board of Education. Can you please state your name, address for the record, and then limit your remarks to 3 minutes?
Trying to unmute our guest, and it's not working right now. Let me keep trying here.
Okay.
Okay, he's unmuted now.
Okay, thank you. After teaching for college.
Can you state your name and address, please?
Tim Whiter, 739 Eaton Road, 14617.
Thank you, Mr. Wetters. Then go ahead.
Okay, so after teaching for 25 years at the college level, I was dismayed to find a significant number of college freshmen had not truly understood to the degree they were participating in the political process. And so my effort and my goal tonight is to make sure, working with you and the district, to make sure no one graduates from our high school without understanding and actively participating in the political process. John has shared with me the way in which you have engaged students in your process, enabling them to participate, for example, in having input into the budget that directly impacts, their lives and their learning experiences, which is an excellent opportunity to convince them that that a political process or working through elected representatives does work. And so I would like to, I've submitted a proposal. I'd like to pursue that and to explore whether working with Mr. Johnson and his staff, if they're interested, we're able to put together a process whereby, again, as someone graduates from our high school, they are aware of, understanding, and participating in the political process. At the college level, no one passed my courses unless they gave me a listing of the 8 people that represented them in the various levels of government and their contact information, and then submitted copies of emails that they had actually sent to their elected representatives, stating their interests and their preferences and their desires of how they wanted to be represented. So I think it's hopeful that we're seeing peaceful demonstrations of the desire to participate in shaping the society. I found the same thing in the classroom, that the students I taught were anxious to transform their society, to participate in their society. Teaching sociology provided a great opportunity to explore that with them. So I wanted simply to encourage and work with West Irondequoit to make sure that our graduates, when they end up, by the time they get to college, are actively participating in their society and in their country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Waters. So you did submit that to Mr. DeVeronica, I believe?
Yes,
Correct?
that's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. DeVeronica's office will share with the superintendent's office, and we'll make sure that each board member gets that. I will remind you that, or just comment to you that we will pass that information around through Dr. Johnson's office to our curriculum staff and someone from the district who is best suited to answer that or to reach out to you with questions or to further that conversation. Will be reaching out to you. So I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us and being passionate about being involved in the electoral process. And I believe that it can only make for more well-rounded students. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, John.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else to speak tonight, Dr. Johnson?
No, Mr. Vey, there's not.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes. Ms. Kelly, can I have a resolution, please?
Recommended resolution is, be it resolved that the minutes of the May 21st, 2020 business meeting, the May 28th, 2020, and June 1, 2020 budget hearings, and the June 4th, 2020 audit committee study session be accepted as presented.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Metro. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Is there any time, or at any time, is there any questions right now from the board for about minutes? Dr. Johnson, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on that. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 Kelly, that looks like 7-0. We're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is good news. At our regular meetings, we have our student representatives present the good news. So I'll turn this over to Dr. Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Vey, it's a pleasure to introduce Hannah and Elizabeth. They're back with us tonight. This is actually their final meeting. So they put in a tremendous amount of time serving as a conduit between the Board of Education and our student body, and done an excellent job with that. Despite the challenges regarding the pandemic and having to work remotely. And I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm sure that the board has some comments too, but it's been a pleasure to work with you both, and two outstanding, high achieving, phenomenal character young people that I know will go on to do great things. So thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to you two, Hannah and Elizabeth.
You. Briarwood Elementary first grader Viola Fortunato was recently honored by the Rochester Police Department as a Do the Right Thing Award winner. She donated presents for her birthday in December to the Irondequoit Police Department so they could benefit other children. 47 students were inducted into National Honor Society, and 26 more were recognized by the Rochester section of the American Chemical Society for their achievement in chemistry. 8 of our 10 schools earned a top 20 spot in Buffalo Business first annual ratings of Rochester area schools and overall for the 6th straight year. West Irondequoit rated 7th out of 67 districts. 6 of our 10 schools either improved or stayed the same, and noteworthy jumps included Brookview up to 17 spots to number 37 and Seneca up 9 spots to number 40. Senior Jack Lockmeyer was selected for the Corning Corporation's Technician Pipeline Program. That includes a $25,000 annual stipend from Corning Corporation for each of his 2 years studying optics at MCC. He'll also have a job waiting for him with Corning after he graduates.
IHS Senior Car Parade last Sunday featured more than 250 vehicles carrying out our soon-to-be graduates. With 289 students in the class of 2020, it was amazing participation for what could be an annual tradition. Rogers Middle School held its own faculty car parade on Wednesday. 9 seniors were recipients of the Business Education Career and Technical Education Diploma endorsement. That honor was given out by the State Education Department. Emma Vandewater, another member of the class of 2020, appeared recently on NBC's World of Dance. She is trained at the O'Days Dance Theater owned by IHS grad Jessica O'Days. The West Irondequoit Foundation awarded 4 grants for the 2020-2021 school year, totaling in $32,831. That bumps 30-year grant total more than $996,000. Grants were for equipment to facilitate learning about DNA investigations, active pens for physics, a CNC router for technology classes, and rain gear for students and faculty when visiting the Helmer Nature Center. A tree was planted and dedicated in front of the IHS in honor of Michael Lynch. He was a part of the class of 2020 and would have graduated this year. His father, Patrick, was on hand along with school officials, including Bridget McCallahan, the teacher who saw the idea to honor Michael. Irondequoit Lawn and Landscape donated the tree.
Okay, thank you for that good news report. And I'll just say that it's been a pleasure this year having you ladies with us. We've seen you grow and kind of be able to move on your feet as we transition from in-person meetings to remote meetings. And I just want to thank you for your time that you gave to the board, but also to the students of the district. I don't know if any other board members want to chime in, but we can do that now if you want.
Well, I know that you still have a report to coming, so you're not done with us, but for this meeting. But Hannah and Elizabeth, you have just represented your classmates very well. I've always looked at this liaison position as a really, really important one. It's not only to let us know what's happening, but also so that you can hear what is happening in the wider picture throughout the district and take that back. And you've represented your students very well, and it's been such a pleasure to get to know both of you. And I hope that you will keep in touch, and so that we can see where your journeys lead you. I'm really excited for your paths. So I wish you much luck and thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Superintendent Report. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Van. I'm going to give Mr. DeVeronica a chance to start that up.
Do you not see it, Chief?
I don't. You want to kick the host back over to me?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Let me see the room here. My bad. 1 second, please. Aaron, I believe you are the co-host. We are co-hosts. Aaron, you're muted. Aaron, you're muted.
Thanks, Jeff. Do you see the report of the superintendent here?
Yes, we do.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your patience, okay? So tonight I just want to start out with a few celebrations here, and Hannah and Elizabeth mentioned some, but I think that they're worth noting again, we had 8 out of 10 of our buildings named to the Buffalo Business First, and they were in the top 20 this year. So, you know, the Buffalo Business First sometimes is a little bit mystical, and but they do a nice job of drilling in to the different aspects of how we assess ourselves here as a district, all different sides, academically, financially, and others. And so I think it is worth noting. And so I just want to call out those buildings here. Irondequoit High School actually moved up, and these are the buildings that actually moved up the rankings. Those are the ones I want to list off this year. Irondequoit High School, Brookview Elementary, Colebrook, Seneca, South Long. They were in that group there of 8, but they actually moved up the rankings. So congratulations to obviously the staff for all of their hard work, dedication, to those building leaders, and to you as the Board of Education. Hannah and Elizabeth had mentioned the Western Irondequoit Foundation. I just point that out because they do a tremendous amount for our students. I appreciate, I've learned very quickly just how much heart and hard work is behind them. And so they're just a tremendously dedicated group of people. Just wanted to thank them personally. Class of 2020 celebrations and graduation. If you had a chance to attend that senior parade, it was a magical event. It was so nice to see our students come together, our seniors, the smiles on their faces. It was a lot of joy, you know, working remotely for the last 3 months, and the pride that was reflected in the parents, and just thank you to the community, because there was an outpouring again from them, and I think that just reflects the pride, the commitment that they have in our students. And then I want to give a quick shout out to the building administration and staff. They've done a great job celebrating students. We kicked off graduation this week with our first graduate who had some conflicts going on this upcoming weekend, but we look forward to sharing in that moment with all of the families as they cross the stage, or actually the graduates cross the stage, and then they have an opportunity for pictures, and just want to congratulate them on everything that they've accomplished. Materials pickup, you see a nice picture over here. That went extremely well, thanks to the preparation planning of our staff and our administrators in those buildings. And again, what I liked most was, as you can see here, they put a little bit of a personal touch on that, showed how much they loved our students, how much they missed them, and I know that meant a lot. So thank you to them for doing that. Lastly, just want to thank our community for the support that they showed through the budget process by approving the 2021 budget. And I want to congratulate both Ann and John on being voted for 3 more years here with the Board of Education. I look forward to working with you both and continuing that relationship, because I've come to recognize and really respect how much this means to you, not only the service, but our students and the community. So I think we're in for a really bright future. So thank you to the community again for the support. Real quick update on the use of facilities. So we were doing a little bit of cleaning out there with the track. That's back open. Tennis courts, as you know, are open. Turf Stadium, quick update on that. Governor changed the cap on gatherings, so groups up to 25 can use that. We have opened that valve like we said we would, monitoring how things are going. So we are starting now. Those will be open. I'm talking about the Turf Stadium, baseball fields, softball fields. They'll be open from 7 a.m. now till 8 p.m. weekdays. So the next step, if everything continues to go well, people use those respectfully and safely, is that we would continue extending that to the weekends. But again, that's for authorized use. There can't be any organized practices or competitions or anything like that. But As I look out my office window today, I see some kids out there kicking the soccer ball. So it's great to see people back being active. Next, just give a quick update on our emergency management team. So this is a new team we put together specifically to respond to emergencies as they happen. It was something that we had talked as a group collectively and had recognized as maybe a gap for us and recognized a need moving forward. So right now, they're responding to the prolonged pandemic, the needs associated with the pandemic, and some of the organization and leadership required for that. So as you know, we're going to be reopening in the fall in some fashion or manner. And so the last thing that we did here as a group is we created some advisory work groups and split ourselves up. We had started that informally. We made it a little bit more formal at our last meeting. And you can see the groups listed there. School operations, logistics, instructional services, public health and social emotional wellness, support team, equity and family community needs, transportation, and food service. So we're trying to balance the teams, and the facilitators of those have done a great job in listing folks, but I wanted to offer the opportunity for the Board of Education. We think that it's important that you're represented on those. So please give that some consideration. I know that you're busy people, but it would be a value added to have one representative per advisory group if you're interested. So reach out to me. We can talk later, and we can get you connected with those. Along with that, we created kind of a guiding document for the team moving forward, because it's not only for COVID-19, but this team will exist. Let's say if there's a significant weather event or something of that nature, then they would be enlisted to respond to that. And the whole idea, I put this quote at the bottom from the draft guidance document. Purpose of this is to convene people capable of informing action plans, partnering together, and working with people in authority to implement those plans. Some of these emergencies will happen very quickly. Some, like this pandemic, will happen over time. And then the second thing that isn't reflected in that statement is communication. So that was something that we had noticed as we were going through the COVID pandemic here, that we needed a guaranteed way to make sure that people were being included as far as their ideas and input, and then that we could guarantee that good communication within our stakeholders. And I think that this is a good vehicle for that. Next, I just want to give an update on our COVID-19 thought exchange. So really great response rate for that for the first time, according to our advisors from Thought Exchange. So we had nearly 300 community members, family members respond to the Thought Exchange. And then on the staff side, about 80. We chose to hold on the student Thought Exchange. We'll do that over the summer. But the data there is in the hands of our leadership team now, and we'll be putting together some reports that are going to go out in our final edition of the staff bulletin, In the Know, which will be out early next week. And we will also be turnkeying some of that to our families. One of the things that I noted very quickly, 10 out of the top 20 thoughts, 10 of the top most highly rated thoughts. And again, I put this visual up there in case you are not familiar with Thought Exchange. You got a really nice website, but you can share a thought related to the exchange. So this exchange was specifically about planning for the fall and the reentry with COVID-19. So you share a thought. Other people can look at your thought. They can start your thought. And there's a rating scale. I believe it's up to 5. And based on how many stars are given to that thought, it prioritizes them. And they got some really good analytics in there. But going back to what I was going to say, 10 of the top 20 thoughts were concerns around the social, emotional, and mental well-being of our students and staff. So people are really nervous as to what state our students and our staff are going to return back to us in the fall. And then what are we going to do to support those people? So again, we'll have more information to come. Then I want to talk a little bit about our efforts around anti-racism in Western Irondequoit. Thanks to our leadership, some of the folks are with us tonight, and some staff that participated in this. We were able to have some talking circles about the recent events and racism in America, partnering with Peary and taking advantage of some of our recently trained staff members who are well-versed in facilitating those conversations. We really offered 2 opportunities for students, one for families, more to come, but we offered something called a Brave Space for both students and families. And what that does, it allows like anyone who's interested in speaking on that to come and share their feelings, their ideas, their concerns in a circle format so that everybody has an equal chance to speak. And then we recorded those things, and we'll be sharing a kind of just a synthesis of that here at a later time. But we had separate ones for students and then for families. And for the families, we broke it up between the elementary and secondary. And then we also offered a safe space for students. And that was a place for students of color specifically who may not be comfortable going into a group, the Brave Space, where it was a mixed race group, and to talk about their feelings more privately within a group of people of color, and to share their feelings, maybe some of their needs and their ideas for us moving forward. Just to share a couple of the thoughts that were shared there. You know, we recognize we have to continue to implement and design a more inclusive curriculum. That came across very loud and clear. We need to continue to work on the diversity of our staff to reflect the diversity of our students. And again, I think that these are efforts that have started, but they're not finished yet. And this is work that we have to continue to stay dedicated and committed to. We need to talk more often to our students and give them opportunities like this so that we can listen to those specifically that are affected. And really take planned, realistic action steps, be very transparent about the work, and tie that to accountability for ourselves so that we know that we're moving forward and progressing. Then ongoing training for our staff. So some really good things. We're going to do more of those to come. And that, my friends, is my report.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for that information. Any questions from the board on that report? None being had, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is report of our student representatives. I'll turn it back to Hannah and Elizabeth.
Mr. Vey, I think they left.
Oh, boy.
Yep, I think that with COVID-19, they don't have a report.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a report of our treasurer. Ms. Kelly, can I have a resolution, please?
Recommended resolution is be it resolved that the May 31, 2020 financial statements and treasurer's report be accepted as presented.
Motion, please.
I'll motion it.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Steckley. This time, is there any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Brennan, would you like to add anything at this time?
No, I mean, the information's there for the board to review. I know there weren't any questions. I just will note that because we're coming to the end of our fiscal year, we won't see a treasurer's report or financial statements until our August meeting, just based on the timing of the meetings, and also provides us an opportunity to close our books up. But everything is in good order going into the close of that fiscal year.
Okay. So with no questions from the board, we're going to go ahead and vote on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye, Ms.
Aye.
Kelly, that looks like 7-0. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is report of our leadership staff. We'll start with our business area. We'll start with audit committee. Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Brennan, I don't know if we have an update. Do we have an update for the audit committee?
No update.
Okay.
Okay, nothing for the audit. We'll move on to the next one, which is facilities planning. Dr. Johnson again.
Yes, sir. So the work continues with the renewal project, and Mr. Brennan does have an update regarding that. So, Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, so a couple things with that, and actually, Dr. Johnson, I don't know if you can, if you still have sharing options. I have a short PowerPoint just to give an update in terms of the progress with the renewal project, if that's possible. It's on board docs. Excellent, thank you. So as Dr. Johnson indicated, that the renewal project is moving along very well. We've made significant progress in many areas of the project, and I'll just go through a quick budget update. If you remember, the original referendum was $9.6 million. We do have some money set aside still. That's that DASNY allocation for potential borrowing as we move into bonding the remaining $3.6 million. But we are in good shape financially, and in fact, the work that's been done recently is as a result of very few unforeseen circumstances, and so we're able to draw down against that construction contingency budget to be able to do some things that we had put aside pending budgetary availability underneath that authorization. So if you just go to the next slide quickly. Yep, so that's our remaining contingency. But you can see we're moving really well through the project at this point. Very few change orders that have occurred. And on the next slides, this is what we're going to be targeting in June. So really we're at punch list through DAKE, mainly tied to the bathrooms. They are working on the new front office. Remember, this was part of our security improvements, installing a secure vestibule there. We're continuing to work through the high school. Remember taking a stack of bathrooms offline at a time as they work all through all 3 floors. Continue to work through there, and they're actually making quite a bit of work also getting done in the gymnasium and locker room areas. And roof work continues throughout the building. Iroquois, there's some roof work as well, and getting going on some work on some of the pathways along the exterior of it. And at Rogers, they are replacing some corridor carpet, which followed removal of some old lockers down there. We continue to have regular meetings with our construction managers and our contractors. And again, everything is going very well at this point. We've got some pictures coming up. I can talk you through those too. So this is an image of the DAKE main office, again, to create that secure vestibule for people entering. We've also redesigned the main office for that. So you can see that the framing is progressing very well. This, if you remember back to our last, I guess it was 2 board meetings ago, we talked about, again, as that as the project moves along and we have more funds available because of not very many unforeseen circumstances, we're able to release some funds. This was the picture of the work done at the DAKE Plaza in front of the building. If you remember, the concrete had been rather old and starting to break up. So they've done some great work there, extending all the way back to the bus loop between the 2 buildings. You can see they're getting at some of the bathrooms still in the high school. A lot of bathrooms are being renovated. So they, besides the stacks, there are some single bathroom entries that they are also working on as well. This is some of the work as they're redesigning the locker room on the 1st floor at the high school. And this is image of what I mentioned earlier about working on some of the exterior pathways at Iroquois School. And that is an update in terms of the renewal project. I'll also mention that on tonight's agenda is another example again of being able to do some additional work that we kind of put on hold pending how the project progressed, and that's tied to the replacement of the floors and the bleachers at the Sproul Fieldhouse. So we're really excited to be able to get that done. So I'll be glad to answer any questions from the board if there are any.
Any questions from the board at this time? Well, James, I thank you for those updates. It's nice to see that, I guess one thing from, I'll say from the pandemic closure is we were able to, I'll say, get a jump on a lot of this work that wouldn't have taken place to school was out. So it's nice that we were able to use some of our contractors that were available, and we thank them for their work.
Great, yes, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the personnel section. First of all, Ms. Kelly, can I have a resolution, please?
The recommended resolution is be it resolved that the personnel agenda dated June 18, 2020, as recommended by the superintendent of schools be approved as presented.
Motion, please.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Why don't I turn this over to Dr. Johnson before we ask questions from the board? Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. I do not have anything to add at this time, but I would ask Dr. Hunter if he had anything to add.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I'm going to just make a few quick comments, and then we'll see if Mrs. Kramer, who did a lot of the interview work and the hiring process for some of these candidates, also would like to chime in. First of all, we are onboarding some exceptional new teachers with a variety of experiences, some senior members of the teaching corps and some new members of the teaching corps. I was able to get involved in the reference checks, and to a person, we heard nothing except exceptional comments about each of these individuals regarding their capacity for continued growth, their connections with kids, their ability to dig in to curriculum and make it meaningful and purposeful with kids. So we're very excited, and Mrs. Kramer might be able to mention a little bit more in depth. But before I hand it off to her, our work now is switching to doing some extensive screening and hiring for administrative positions. We are aggressively working towards identifying candidates for our interim day high school principal position and our interim assistant principal position at Irondequoit High School. I want to thank the committees that are doing the work right now, and we'll have candidates prepared for Dr. Johnson and the board within the next week. Mrs. Kramer, any thoughts about some of those candidates that we're presenting to the board tonight as potential new hirees?
Yeah, additionally to the instructional piece, the candidate pool ranges in lots of experiences around restorative practices and some of our social emotional learning pieces, as well as there's a couple candidates that have had some background in some of our cultural competency work in really selecting curriculum and texts that are more aligned with our current focus areas in that venue. They're high quality.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any questions at this time on the personnel agenda from the board? Okay, none being had, we're going to go and vote on this section of the personnel agenda. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, that's 7-0. We're going to move on to the next item in the personnel agenda, which is approval of personnel addendums A and B. Ms. Kelly, can I have a resolution, please?
The recommended resolution is be it resolved that personnel addendums A and B for the 2020-21 school year be approved as presented.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Metro. Second, please.
I'll second.
Who was that? Mr. Long?
Me, yeah.
Mr.
Sure.
Long, thank you. Okay, again, I'll turn this over to Dr. Johnson for any questions or any comments on this before we ask the board.
I have no comments. Dr. Hunter, any comments?
No additional comments.
Okay. Board's had time to review this from our last meeting. Is there any questions or comments from the board at this time on personnel addendums A and B? None being had, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, that's 7-0 again. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a personnel agreement. Ms. Kelly, a resolution, please.
The recommended resolution is, be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the written agreement between the Superintendent of Schools of the West Arundecoit Central School District and an employee of the district fully executed on June 10, 2020.
Motion, please.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Steckley. Anything from Dr. Johnson on this, please?
Gervais, I don't have any comments to add at this time. Dr. Hunter, any comments?
No additional comments.
Okay, board's had time to review this. Any questions or comments from the board? None being had, we'll go ahead and vote on this. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, that's 7-0. Okay, I believe that moves us on to next item on the agenda, which is new business. Start, is that correct, Ms. Kelly? Am I on the right page?
Yes.
Yeah, new business. Thank you. We'll start with our first item in new business, which is, actually, before I do that, I'd just like to go back. Dr. Hunter, I believe this might be one of your last meetings with us at West Arundecoit. And again, I want to thank you for your service to our district in the many capacities that you've helped us over the years. It's always nice to see your face back at district office, and again, to be able to step in and help us. And we welcome Ms. Creamer into her new role, knowing that you are always there as a phone call away, as a distant mentor, I will say. But we wish Ms. Creamer the best of luck. We know she's going to be very successful in that position. And again, we thank you for your service to West Arundecoit once again.
Dr. Hunter, you're
You're
muted.
on mute.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And as you know, it's always a pleasure for me to be able to work with the West Arundecoit teaching faculty and with the community and with the Board of Education. I've enjoyed working with Dr. Johnson, getting to know him. There is a very strong leadership team with Board and Dr. Johnson and this community. It's always an exciting place to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we welcome Ms. Creamer on board. Okay, we'll move on now to new business. Pedestrian safety update. God, I almost got stuck there. Dr. Johnson.
Mr. Vey, so with us tonight, we have our Director of Physical Athletics, Health and, or Physical Athletics, Physical Education, Health and Athletics, Miss Kim Schoen. And Miss Kim Schoen has been working with our physical education teachers to put together some experiences to be embedded at different grade levels to teach our students how to be safe pedestrians. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Schoen at this time. She did a phenomenal job.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And I just want to say thanks for having me here tonight. So this has been some ongoing work that we've been really targeting since the beginning of the school year. So it's just a good opportunity to kind of sum up the work we've done and then talk about some next steps. So the biggest thing that in our conversations with my conversation with Dr. Johnson and our staff, we really wanted to make sure that our pedestrian safety was at the forefront. It really aligns with our priority of student safety and well-being, especially with the design of our campuses and communities being, really heavily with our student population and walking and just in our parking lots. And then we really wanted to target K-12 scope so that we were just making sure that the information students were getting was building over the course of time here and was continuous. And then working with IPD has just really been a great partnership. Officer Lawtons has been phenomenal. And it's just a really good proactive way for our students to interact with IPD. They've been great working with it. So I'm just going to kind of take you through what we've been doing. So our EQ is just what strategies and guidelines can we just incorporate to ensure safe traveling? So we kind of met with IPD and try to get a lot of the information, working with them to say, what are the most pertinent things that our kids need to know and be aware of? So kind of working with them to prioritize the content, and then bringing in our curriculum and instruction piece, working with Karen and Chrissy to kind of just oversee that, and then break it down to how is it going to really be best deliverable at each grade level. So if you just kind of reference the slide at K3, we thought a great way to just kind of plug that in would be during our end of year field day events. So we already have a sports day. We're kind of leading into that end of the year. So just incorporating like some of the pedestrian safety with some bicycle safety and just overall summer safety as kids are getting ready to kind of leave and depart. So we had IPD officers willing this year to kind of attend and do some stations with our kids that are live and do kind of a Q&A session, building off some of the work that our PE staff would cover naturally throughout the school year. So that was able to happen. I know that with the COVID-19 remote learning, Dr. Johnson and I wanted to make sure that even though we were out, that work continued. So we were able to cover some of that in our virtual field day, as well as during some of our K3 learning experiences that our teachers did. So we really honed in some of our weekly specific lessons for kids right on our pedestrian safety piece, partnering with IPD. And then at 4-6, kind of wanted to plug in as we got to that, making some interactive lessons that would be delivered kind of during those spring PE courses, so that as we're kind of gearing up for March and like nice weather, it's a good reminder of students. So taking the content piece and matching it up with like a physical activity component. So this year we had planned some relays and some team scavenger hunts where kids were moving and being able to review that content, where IPD officers would come into both Rogers and Iroquois. So I know that Officer Lawton's got to join our 4-6 staff from both meetings this year on a Zoom call to make sure that content and delivery continued over the COVID shutdown. And then at 7-12, we kind of have a dual component. So it really plugged in really naturally to some of the work that we do in our health curriculum already at the 7th grade level. So we kind of just made sure that that was folded in. And with health being a half-year course, we try to time it into where we plugged it into the scope of and sequence of the curriculum to make sure that we're delivering it earlier in the fall when the weather's still nice, and then kind of looping in with our spring semester kids right at the beginning of time about where March would fall as the weather's kind of getting nicer. So that delivery occurs in our 7th grade health. And then in our high school health, we kind of paired it up with our defensive driving piece. So it was a really cool connection. Our health teachers, Adam Palumbo and Carrie Whipple, did a great job kind of making it just full encompass of that defensive driver, awareness piece, coupled with what does that look like on the other side as a pedestrian. In addition, you know that our phys ed classes travel to Sproul Fieldhouse in our walking around campus. So we just talked about a lot of just like targeted reminders as kids are crossing the street, and just that re-emphasis through that during that time. So I'm really happy to report that that learning occurred and all during the remote learning continued. And then we wanted to make sure that we tied in some of that social media reminder, knowing that our community and our students are on those platforms. So thank you to Jeff, Veronica, and Jake Honan. They did a great job kind of just plugging in, getting some pieces that our kids were able to learn and get some student share outs and do some of those social media presentations as another layer. And then just a couple of the key components of our lessons you can see here. Just basically working with IPD, they were just like, it doesn't matter if a kid's in kindergarten, 12th grade, or an adult. Just these key things are critical for reminding and learning. So just basically overall, keeping yourself safe, being visible and alert, following the rules, teaching our kids what are proper crosswalk procedures and important safety signs, and then just kind of folding in some of the statistics of what's going around locally to just make it more authentic and representative of our actual community. And then just kind of reminding them of some facts and laws as we go through. So kind of our main key things, working with Dr. Johnson and our curriculum staff as we're building curriculum documents, just to make sure that's plugged into our curriculum so that it's sustainable year to year. And I just want to thank our health and phys ed staff. They've done an awesome job, and Dr. Johnson and IPD for their work. So I'll open it up if we have any specific questions at this time.
Any questions from the board at this time? So, Ms. Schoen, thank you for that presentation, and it's good to see that we're pulsing this out to not only our students, but the community, and it's important work, and thank you for the update.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is diversity and equity updates. I'll turn this over to Dr. Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Vey. So during my update, I talked a little bit about our work around becoming more anti-racist here at the Western Irondequoit. And I thought working with Karen and Chrissy around curriculum instruction, it would be pertinent to have an update tonight from the Board of Education community about some of their work and where we're at, and maybe some of the plans moving forward. So Ms. Finter and Mrs. Miga are here to update the board on some of our culturally responsive work in the curriculum instructional field. So take it away, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Johnson. And you know, given the recent events in the news, we just wanted to bring to the forefront the work that has happened and is ongoing within our curriculum and instruction world, but also where we anticipate this work to head over the next year and into the future. So again, we just wanted to share with you this brief overview tonight, and I know that there'll be certainly more to come in the future. And go ahead to the next. So as we begin, we want to make sure that we anchor back to the mission and core commitments of the district. We want to make sure, you know, certainly that our students have the skills and tools they need to reach peak performance. And this year really found us focusing in on those blue boxes, right? Coming back to the whole child, you know, certainly our high expectations in West Irondequoit for academics serve our students very well. They're well prepared to go on to college and career, but we also don't want to lose sight of the people that they are becoming. And so this year, really focusing on leveraging and building relationships with students so that they have a strong sense of identity and a sense of agency, change agents, and that will help foster their independence. And that certainly has served our students well during this time of at-home learning. It was not easy, but they certainly demonstrated their resilience and ability to be very independent learners. And so, you know, we just want to make sure that all of our work is anchored in these two important documents. Okay, so before we discuss some of the work that we're hoping to engage in moving forward, we thought it would be important to briefly just review some of the work that we've already been engaging in that we feel will help us as we move forward, continue to listen and learn, and really understand where we need to go. So first, we wanted to think about the work that we've done already as a district focused on leveraging reading as a tool for empowerment. So we've talked a lot over the past couple of years about the science of reading and how this is really essential to ensure that each child leads us with that ability to not only read, but access the world around them and truly grow a love of literature so that they are really ready for anything that they encounter in life. So if we go to the next slide. And again, we think about, so what has that looked like to focus in on the science of reading? And so we've been working very hard, and you may have remembered a presentation from Brenna Farrell and Trista Fiorino when they talked about the science of reading, what that work looks like at a previous board meeting. And this slide just helps to describe some of that work that has occurred. So we've been focused heavily on adopting this science-based approach. And by doing that, it's going to ensure that our instructional practices are equitable, which leads to multiple access points for all students being able to learn to read. And we would do that through explicit teaching, speech to print approach, and opportunities for all students to engage in tasks at their independent reading level. And so essentially what this
does is when we equip our teachers to be able to provide students the tools to access all different types of text, we're essentially eliminating some of the advantages or disadvantages that any student might bring, based on their experiences prior to schooling. So we want to make sure that all of our students have the proper tools moving forward. And so this has certainly had an impact on our instructional delivery in the classroom. So students are able to embrace reading at every grade level. And we've focused heavily on, as you know, we've created our independent reading document in order to empower students to be able to choose books that they enjoy reading, not just that they're asked to read for a certain purpose. We want students who pick up a book just because they love to do it. And so this is done through those literature circles where students are able to self-select text, and also having our students take that ownership of what is their goal in reading and how are they know that they're going to get there. So this has really helped us to ensure those equitable practices are in place. And if we go to the next slide, why is this so important? And this is, because the research tells us that our students that don't learn to read adequately in elementary school, those are the students that will have that persistent reading difficulties and other negative life outcomes. So it is very important to have this in place and continue to grow this year and beyond to be a truly culturally responsive and anti-racist curriculum and instruction. So we are going to continue this work and excited about what's to come.
So in terms of English language arts, Brenna Farrell has led the work of the department to really work with teachers to ensure that texts that are used within classrooms do represent diverse perspectives and positively portray characters of color. Texts represent those diverse perspectives and are written by a lot of diverse authors. Teachers at the 9-12 level in a department meeting conducted an audit of the texts that they use in their classrooms. What are those touchstone works of literature in the canon? And after they did that audit, they analyzed those texts for who are the main characters? What is their ethnicity and background? What are the multiple perspectives that might be missing from the canon? And so because of that work, that foundation has been laid. And so now new units are being incorporated and developed that allow for a greater diversity. And you may remember earlier this year, looking at some texts for literature circles for our new course, Diverse Voices in Literature at the 12th grade level, but in addition to 8th grade and other grades as well. So this work is starting to snowball and is really making a difference. We know that just being culturally relevant isn't enough. We need to sustain that work. And so really activating students, thinking about those social justice themes and putting them at the center of teaching and learning. Our Diverse Voices, the culminating project is for students, as they're reading different literature to connect to a agent of change within their community. And so we had students working with Willow to create social media campaigns and advertising campaigns to provide support to that organization. Students contacted legislators to voice their opinion about where they wanted to see change. And so really using literature as a stepping stone for this kind of work. We're not fully there yet. There's lots more to be done, but this provides a good start. The titles on the slide just kind of show you some of the representation that is now working their way into our canon, into our classrooms. And I am so proud of the work that Brenna has led and that the teachers are engaging in. They're really focused on student-centered learning and putting students in the driver's seat with the self-selection of texts that better represent the world around them.
So similarly, in social studies, led by our K-12 social studies curriculum supervisor, Kim Crystal, we have laid a nice foundation to the continued work that will need to be done around building that culturally responsive and sustaining curriculum. And so this year, Kim took her 512 department and really took time to unpack the social studies standards, the framework, revise scope and sequence documents, and construct curriculum maps to have a better representation of a diverse historical perspective. And so a couple of the ways that she did that was through her department meetings. She had professional development and led professional development, which she's done truthfully, not just in her department, but through multiple venues within our district. She's led PD on culturally responsive teaching, focused in on those practices like gradual release, productive struggle, holding high expectations, implicit bias, and engaging students in civil discourse. And she also, as a matter of fact, has led some of our leadership in a little bit of implicit bias, professional development, and laid some of that groundwork there. In addition, at her department meetings, we brought in SUNY Brockport history department representatives, 2 professors that were able to provide a lecture on Puerto Rican history and the authentic teaching of slavery and capitalism in America. And we were also able to partner with the Baobab African Culture Center. And again, teachers were able to partner and work with representatives from the Culture Center to build their historical knowledge of African and African American history and culture. And so through these experiences, the Social Studies Department and more of our staff has been able to, again, lay that foundation of understanding about where we can better adjust our curriculum and instruction to represent this diverse historical perspective. So again, really providing us a great start and quite a bit of work to really take an even deeper look now at how we can adjust our curriculum.
In addition to those components, the curriculum of social studies in and of itself is changing drastically. I want to say 3 years ago now, but maybe it was even 4. The social studies framework was produced by New York State to really move away from and shift from a singular perspective of history and a massive amount of core content knowledge to really being well-versed with multiple perspectives of history and the skills that students need in order to interpret those perspectives and define and come to their own conclusions around the enduring issues of our time. So in this framework, we know essential concepts emphasize civic literacy, rights and responsibilities, the impact of race and racism on both American and world history. It shifts away from Eurocentric, white-centric perspectives as the center of our historical narrative. Students are all throughout are able to construct meaning and understanding of the historical narrative as they analyze multiple perspectives. And the shifts move from a presentation of a singular narrative from the teacher to a learner-driven source analysis. Students interpret the context based on these various perspectives. For instance, students in 7th and 8th grade might study during the revolutionary time period of America, might study the perspective of Black colonists and what slave perspectives were at the time. Students study the Haudenosaunee influence on the creation of the Constitution, and they might look at the age of exploration from the perspective of Africa and indigenous nations of America. So it really lends multiple perspectives and multiple lenses to the study of history, which has been traditionally Eurocentric and from a white perspective. as Chrissy mentioned, we are committed to ongoing professional development. We're really leveraging some outstanding partnerships in Peary, the Partners for Restorative Initiatives, as we develop the tools and internal capacity to move work forward. In addition to the information provided that we shared with you earlier this year from the Children's Institute and the needs analysis, there's lots of opportunity in the Rochester area to further partner with the Rochester Equity Network, with NAME, the National Association for Multicultural Education, and even unpacking the New York State Culturally Responsive and Sustaining Educational Framework will provide us great momentum to move this work forward. And I also want to point out that, while we're highlighting ELA and social studies, that's not the end and only area where this work is occurring. Our music department has really learned a great deal from a book study that they engaged in as a department around teaching with respect and really looking at culturally responsive practices from a lens of choral directing, but also from all musical perspectives and directing ensembles. So that work certainly will influence that department and performances for years to come.
So now we'd like to talk a little bit about what are going to be our short-term and then long-term next steps. So we feel very proud of the foundation that we've started to build. But moving forward, we know we have to listen. We have to engage with our community, and we have to be open to the work that's going to challenge our status quo and disrupt our system. So here are a couple of the short-term next steps that we're going to be taking. Hopefully many of you have heard already about the Stamped Community Read Partnership, where we are working closely and hand in hand with East Irondequoit School District to engage our entire Irondequoit community in a read and discussion of Stamped. And so we're very excited for that, and we hope to continue to hear the needs of our community through that experience. We're going to continue our listening circles, having just completed our elementary level listening circle last night. I was just so inspired by the honesty to which our families were able to share with us. And I really believe that that's going to help us to better understand where we need to go next as a district. And so we'll continue to provide those listening circles, not only for families and community members, but for our students and staff as well. We're also going to make sure that we keep working on our SEL core competency training for teachers. We know that when we focus on relationships and the ability to build those strong relationships, that we're all going to be better for that. And another area in the short term that we're going to focus on is exploring the tenets of culturally relevant and sustaining pedagogy. How does that differ from culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching, and how will that help us build a solid understanding to make changes to our curriculum and instruction that aren't just something that will happen over the next year or two, but that will sustain for the long term?
And we know over the longer term to really move this work forward, we really need to hone in on four key components, four key areas, really centered on the concept of governance, to have some district representation that includes stakeholders from the community, that includes students, but to really provide some of the oversight for this work and to be a driver for this work. Certainly the influence on curriculum and instruction, we by no means are finished with this work. We cannot wait to continue to deepen our practice and to really shift that work in the classroom to support our students. We know that strategic planning also plays a role, and as the board and the district works to step into strategic planning with U of R, we will certainly know that this work will be a part of that. And as Chrissy mentioned, listening. We are not an island unto ourselves. We certainly welcome and appreciate all of the input from our stakeholders and look forward to continuing to hear stories and to reflect on our practice and grow our practice. So in conclusion, we are committed to audit, reflect, and build on current curriculum and instructional practices with an end goal of activating anti-racist practices by dismantling implicit bias and understanding implicit bias, preventing marginalization of any stakeholder group, and ensuring equity and access for all. Ways to do that include?
So we're working currently on putting together very closely with Brenna Farrell and Kim Crystal, something called the Strong Voices Project at K6. And this will take a look at the text that we have available and to our students through classroom libraries, read-alouds, and novel units as well, and ensure that there's multiple perspectives and diverse voices included in that representation, and also making sure that we're including really diverse cultural celebrations. So that would not only happen at K6, but that would follow through right into 7-12. So this is something we'll be hoping to bring to you later this summer or early fall, and then continue the work from there.
We also, in the year without data, we're going to be diving into some different forms of data and thinking about practices around grading, practices around acceleration, and really using that information to further refine our practices. That novel work and humanities unit development will continue. And again, as I mentioned, auditing our curriculum. We know that this is just not another initiative for West Irondequoit. As a founding district of the Urban Suburban Program, the founder of Rock to Change, the first district in Monroe County to be spearheading Pathways to Teaching, something very near and dear to my heart. Our own Mosaics group and the wonderful student advocacy and leadership that they embody. It's not just another initiative. It's part of our Irondequoit core belief. And so, we're happy to bring and share this information with you tonight. And we know that there'll be further updates and further information to come.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Is there any questions from the board?
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, we look forward to this good work that's been started, and I'm sure we'll hear more updates through the year. So thank you, Karen and Chrissy, for your updates on that.
Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the TRS reserve. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Kelly to read the resolution. Ms. Kelly?
Recommended resolution is, whereas on June 18, 2020, the West Irondequoit Central School District, the district, established a retirement contribution reserve fund pursuant to General Municipal Law, GML, Section 6R, to fund contributions to the New York State and local employees retirement system. And whereas the Board of Education, the board, has determined it is also appropriate to establish a sub-fund within the Retirement Contribution Reserve Fund to fund contributions to the New York State Teachers Retirement System, TRS, pursuant to GML Section 6R. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of the West Irondequoit Central School District pursuant to GML Section 6R as follows. 1, the board hereby establishes a sub-fund within the Retirement Contribution Reserve Fund to be known as the Retirement Contribution Reserve TRS Subfund. 2, the source of funds for this subfund shall be 1, such amounts as may be provided therefore by budgetary appropriation or raised by tax therefore. 2, such revenues are not required by law to be paid into any other fund or account. 3, such other funds as may be legally appropriated. And 4, such amounts as may be transferred from other reserve funds as authorized by applicable law. 3, the board may authorize expenditures from the sub-fund by resolution, except as otherwise provided by law, monies in this subfund may only be appropriated to finance retirement contributions to the TRS and/or to offset all or a portion of the amount deducted from the monies apportioned to the district from the state for the support of schools pursuant to Education Law, Section 521. 4, no member of the board or employee of the district shall A, authorize a withdrawal from the subfund for any purpose except as provided in GML 6R, or B, expend monies withdrawn from the subfund for the purpose other than as provided in GML Section 6R. 5, the monies contributed from the subfund during the fiscal year shall not exceed 2% of the total compensation or salaries of all teachers employed by the district who are members of TRS paid during the immediately preceding fiscal year, and the balance of subfund shall not exceed 10% of the total compensation or salaries of all teachers employed by the district who are members of TRS paid during the immediately preceding fiscal year. 6, the treasurer is hereby authorized and directed to deposit and invest the monies of such fund in accordance with sections 10 and 11 of the GML and other applicable law. 7, the district shall account for the subfund separate and apart from all other funds of the district to show the source, date, and amount of each sum paid into the subfund, the interest earned by the subfund, capital gains or losses resulting from the sale of investments of the subfund, the order, purpose, date, and amount of each payment from the subfund, the assets of the subfund indicating cash balance and a schedule of investments. The district within 60 days of the end of each fiscal year shall furnish a detailed report of the operation and condition of the subfund to the board. 8, this resolution shall take effect immediately.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Johnson to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. Well, at this time, this was an additional reserve that was just recently approved by the state. And so Mr. Brennan had discussed that with me, and we wanted to present that as an opportunity for the board. So I'm going to ask Mr. Brennan if you have anything in addition to add to that, just to explain some of the uses and the purpose. Mr. Brennan.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Johnson. First of all, to Mrs. Kelly, I'm sorry. But beyond that, the subfund itself, as Dr. Johnson indicated, was added into the New York State law in terms of available reserve for school districts. It's actually one that's been requested for many years. As we all know, that most of our employees are teachers, and therefore they are members of the Teachers Retirement System, or TRS. We've had a different reserve, a retirement reserve, but that's been really tied to ERS, which some of our employees are members of, but this reserve will allow us to save monies for those required annual contributions from our district to New York State for these pension purposes. And so the recommendation is that we establish this fund, reserve fund, so that we can start to save monies for those required annual payments. I'd be glad to answer any questions regarding this reserve, though.
Any questions from the board? James, I just have one. So correct me if I'm wrong, with the overall idea of this fund is to help kind of balance the peaks and valleys of the contribution rate, which changes yearly and is recently, in the last, say, 7 to 10 years, been really affected by market swings because they use a 5-year average to help school districts really in their budgeting process to kind of smooth that number out. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. And as we probably assume, the contribution rate is likely to increase in the near future too, because that 5-year average is going to shift.
So again, this is allowed under New York State law, and districts have advocated for this for many years, and I think it's a good budgeting tool that we can begin to fund to help us with our long-term budget planning of those ups and downs. So Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and vote on this. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Need to make-
Aye.
Ray,
Ms. Kelly, that's 7-0.
Oh.
Gonna move on to the next item on the
I
agenda.
think we,
Mr. Ray?
Mr. May, we did motion and second.
Oh, we didn't?
We did not.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kelly. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Ann. And a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Metris, thank you. I'm sorry about that, Ms. Kelly. It was that long a resolution that you read. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on that now. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Now we have 7-0, Ms. Kelly. I'm sorry about that. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the fund balance resolution. Ms. Kelly.
The recommended resolution is be it resolved that the proposed reserve addition limits for the 2019-20 fiscal year be approved as presented. And they are the tax cert up to the limits of the active cert claims, the reserve for retirement contributions, TRS subfund, 2% of the total teacher salaries for 2018-19, and the reserve for retirement contribution, ERS, any remaining fund balance.
Any questions from the, actually, James, okay, resolution, I'm sorry. Motion, please. I'm getting all confused here.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Second, please.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Okay, now we have the resolution on the table. I'll turn it over to Dr. Johnson again.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. At this time, I'm actually going to turn it right back to Mr. Brennan to explain the recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Yeah, so as we know, at the close of any fiscal year, there are typically some monies remaining from the current fiscal year that have not been appropriated through the budget into the following fiscal year. We refer to that as fund balance. So this is a resolution, year-end resolution that was a recommendation by our auditors a few years ago. It actually goes very well with our overall strategic planning around reserves. And so what this authorization does is it basically establishes what our strategy is for once the books are closed on the current fiscal year, how to allocate any remaining funds that have not been appropriated into the next fiscal year. So as you know, we've already appropriated in excess of $3 million into the 2021 budget to help offset the local share. So a couple things just to note. So first of all, back in 18-19, the board approved a project with Monroe 1 BOCES. We already did some funding of that project. It's a $22 million project overall, but our share represents $1.8 million. We've already funded $500,000 or $500,000. And so our plan was to complete that funding so that we do not have, so basically we're in good shape in terms of any future obligations for this project. The other piece towards our overall financial strategy is to always maintain our unappropriated fund balance at the legal limit of 4% based on next year's budget. And then finally, we get into the resolution itself and to look at and target 3 reserves as part of this recommendation for funding strategies. First of all, we know we annually have on the books and we receive new ones. It typically comes in late July and early August. Tax certiorari claims. We paid out one to Home Depot this past year, a settlement of that. And so this is a way of saving monies against potentially having to refund large amounts of money. I think our largest one in the last few years is around $600,000. So that doesn't have to come directly out of our budget. We can pull it from a reserve that we have set aside for that for people who are challenging their tax assessments. We typically put the large ones from the businesses in this fund. And then we've also identified 2 other reserves. One was the TRS subfund that was just authorized by the board to go up to the 2% of total teacher salaries from the previous year. That's under law. That was within the resolution that Mrs. Kelly read. And then finally, to if any remaining funds are available to put some additional monies in our ERS reserve. As you know, we within our current year's budget, we withdrew almost $600,000 from that reserve. As part of our next year's budget, we have another authorization of using another $600,000 from that reserve. So this would be an opportunity if monies were available to replenish some of that was withdrawn from those reserves. And so that will all together help us maintain our overall fiscal stability. So that's kind of an overview. I'd be glad to answer any questions that board members have regarding this funding strategy.
Any questions from the board? Okay, none being had. We're going to go ahead and vote on this. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Kelly, that looks like 7-0 to me. Move on to the next item on the agenda, number 5, which is approval of the 2020-21 school lunch prices. Ms. Kelly, resolution, please.
Recommended resolution is be it resolved that the following lunch milk prices for the 2020-21 school year be approved as presented. And I just noticed that I have on here 18-19 and 19-20 rather than 19-20, 20-21. My apologies.
Okay, we'll make that correction.
The student breakfast will be $1.80, adult breakfast $2.60, milk 50 cents, full price student lunch $2.95, and adult lunch $4.15.
Motion, please.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Dr. Steckley. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Brennan to talk a little bit more about the reasons behind the increase.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So really the reasons behind the increases for these student meals is due to a calculator that we're required to use. It's called the Price Lunch Equity Calculator. If you remember, we're part of the basically the federal child nutrition program, and so we're provided funding through New York State, but ultimately from the federal government that provides free and reduced meals to students who meet the criteria. So part of that, part of being in, receiving that subsidy is they require schools to do an annual calculation on their full price meals. And the goal of this is to ensure that the federal government isn't overly subsidizing your school lunch program through its payment to districts for free and reduced meals being served. So what they essentially do, they look at, it's a calculator online. You essentially plug in the meals you're serving, how many are free or reduced. They do a calculation, and then they make it's not a recommendation. It's basically, it's a requirement of what you need to raise your full price student meals by in order to stay in compliance with their rules. So in our case, this past year, for next year, we need to increase our student meals by 10 cents. And as we've done in the past when this occurs, because we have over the last few years, it's either been 5 cents or 10 cents. We also adjust our adult meals in the same fashion. And we've typically kept our milk prices that kind of meets our costs at the same levels.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Any questions from the board?
James, does that calculation include just the pre-COVID closure time, or does it include some of the extended meals that we've been doing since the closure?
It's all pre. It's all before that.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Metris?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Again, this is something that's required by the federal government that we do. It's not done lightly, but it is a requirement of the district. So we'll go ahead and vote on this at this time. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 Kelly, that's 7-0. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the 2020-21 Oakview Lakeview leases. Ms. Kelly, resolution, please.
Recommended resolution is be it resolved that the 2020-21 Oakview and Lakeview leases be approved as presented.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Metris. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Dr. Johnson.
Well, I think the memo there is pretty self-explanatory, but if there was any questions or if Mr. Brennan had anything to add, I would invite those or those comments from Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. We discussed this at our last meeting, but I'd be glad to ask and answer any questions that have come up since then.
I don't believe there's any questions at this time, so we'll go ahead and move ahead with the vote on this. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, that's 7-0 again. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the security contract extension with Swoop One Inc. Ms. Kelly, resolution, please.
The recommended resolution is be it resolved that the Board of Education of the West Arundepoit Central School District approves a contract with Swoop One Inc. to provide security services to the district from July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021 at a rate of $33.64 per hour in an amount not to exceed $97,680.
Motion, please.
I'll move it.
Mr. Sullivan, second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Ms. Kelly, I just need to go back to the last resolution and make a correction. I believe
Yes.
that Dr. Steckley dropped off, so we're going to have to approve that. And I don't know how we do this with Zoom. It's not that she's not absent, but we had a connection issue, so it'll have to be, I believe, 6-0 and not absent or abstain, but you'll figure out the language there,
Yes.
right? She's
Got it.
trying to log, she texted me, she's trying to log back in.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we'll go to, sorry about that. We'll go to this now. Dr. Johnson, please.
Mr. Vey, again, well-written recommendation memo by Mr. Brennan. Mr. Brennan, anything to add?
Just to provide a little context and reminder for people, we do have our own security personnel, including youth assistants. And so that they provide our essential security to our buildings, but we do also utilize Swoop One, who provide excellent services, and they provide assistance for larger events, as well as if there are instances where due to an illness or a vacation, there's an absence from any of our security people, they're able to provide essentially someone to substitute within our building. And we have worked closely with these security workers in the past. They provide good service to us. And so this is a service that we are requesting as an extension to an RFP we had done a few years ago. Within that RFP, there was language within it where we could, if both parties are agreeable to it, to increase it up to an amount not to exceed the CPI rate, which was tied to our tax levy cap of 1.81%. So that's where the numbers came from in terms of that. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that are regarding this recommendation.
Any questions from the board? Okay, none being had. We'll go ahead and vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, Ms. Kelly, that's 6-0 with the connection problem. So can I just ask Aaron, are you hosting the meeting?
I'm a co-host with Jeff.
Can we just keep an eye on the waiting room, because Meg's trying to log back in just to make sure. I don't know if she needs to be put back into the meeting once she comes back in.
We will keep an eye on that, Mr. Vey.
And then once she returns, can you let me know? We'll continue on with our agenda, please. Next one is revised of district policy. Ms. Kelly, resolution, please.
The recommended resolution is be it resolved that revised policy 1540 student representatives to the board dated June 18, 2020 be approved as presented.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Motion, please.
Mr. Vey,
Thank you, Mr.
excuse me.
Metris. Mr. Metris, motion. Second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Johnson.
Ms. Kelly, did you have a comment?
I did. This is a first reading, and I believe that you were going to ask the board if they would consider waiving the second reading and approve it tonight.
Okay, so we need a second resolution for that, Ms. Kelly?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we have a motion that the policy is on the table. I thought we were going to do that after, but that's fine. We'll ask for considering this the first reading. We normally read policies for 2 times. This being student representatives to the board, we're asking that we make a small change to this policy as per the superintendent's recommendation. And we're also asking the board if we can waive that second reading. The board has been supplied this policy, had a chance to comment on it. And at this time, I would recommend to the board that we allow for the waiving of the second reading. So Ms. Kelly, can you give me a resolution for this waiving of the second, please?
Yes, that recommended resolution would be it resolved that the second reading of policy 1540, student representatives to the board, be waived.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Kelly, I didn't hear you when you asked that question before.
That's okay.
So I think we are now ready to turn it over to Dr. Johnson, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Johnson.
Hey, Mr. Vey. So we're bringing this policy to the Board of Education with a couple of slight changes, just to provide a little more flexibility to the board around our student representatives. One important change in note is the elimination of a specific number, 2. So that would allow the board, if, for example, if there's only one viable candidate in a year, then they could accept one candidate. Or if there's more than 2, they could consider having more than 2. And again, as I had described to the board when I presented this, this is the intent, I think, behind this policy is to provide opportunities for students. And if there are 3 viable candidates, this would allow the board to provide that opportunity. Second change to note is that the addition, Mrs. Steckley's on her way back in, by the way. So there was the addition that the high school student body, in collaboration with the superintendent board of education, would recommend these representatives. And the reason for that change was just to continue to be more inclusive and just have a more well-rounded process with the selection of those representatives. So, any questions?
I have no questions at this time. Any other questions from the board? Okay. With the second reading waive, we'll go ahead and vote on that. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, I have 6-0 and 1 technicality.
Dr. Steckley was here.
Oh, she was?
She's back.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back. I voted on that.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mag 2 screens of people I didn't see on the bottom. So Ms. Kelly, that was 7-0. I'm sorry. Okay,
That's okay.
welcome back, Dr. Steckley. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, it's okay. We're learning as we navigate through this new remote session. So next item on the agenda is superintendent contract. Ms.
Mr.
Kelly,
Bay,
can I have?
excuse me? We
Yeah.
just voted on waiving the second reading? Should we vote
Oh, I'm
on
sorry.
approving?
I thought we voted on approving the second reading. So, okay, so we just voted on approving approval to waive the second reading on policy 1540. So
Correct.
we've had the presentation on 1540. The recommendation was to waive the second reading, which now means we can approve the changes to policy 1540. So with that, can I have those all in favor of waiving the change, or to approve the policy as amended, 1540, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, you are keeping me on my feet tonight. Next item on the agenda would be superintendent contract. Ms. Kelly, can I have the resolution, please?
The recommended resolution is be it resolved that the employment agreement between the Board of Education of the West Arundecoit Central School District and Aaron R. Johnson be extended by 2 years, thus creating a July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2025 contract be approved.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Metris. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Okay, I won't turn this over to Dr. Johnson. I guess I'll take this one. So this is extension of the superintendent's contract. So after the board has done its due diligence One, by a annual review of the superintendent's performance. And second, with Dr. Johnson coming on about 18 months ago, we had kind of planned for a review of his contract this past spring. With that, we worked with Dr. Johnson and the board. We came up with a contract extension to make it valid through June 30th, 2025. So I believe the board, I know the board has all had time to review this. Dr. Johnson has reviewed it. We've come to an agreement on this employment contract. So with that, I'll just turn it over to the board for any comments or questions at this time. Okay, no comments or questions at this time. I'm gonna ask that all those in favor raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, I have 7-0. Okay, Dr. Johnson, congratulations and welcome. And we're glad you're going to be with the district for another 5 years.
Just want to say thank you to the Board of Education for that. I appreciate the extension of the contract and the support. And we had a great discussion about my evaluation. And again, you folks were extremely thoughtful, very reflective in the process, and provided some, not only some very complimentary information and statements back, but also some ideas and some comments to push my thinking and reflection to make sure that we're continuing to improve and grow. So again, just want to thank you for that. I think you guys do an amazing job and are extremely committed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Johnson. So we'll move on. Ms. Kelly, we're ready to move on to consent agenda now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move on to consent agenda. Ms. Kelly, resolution, please.
The recommended resolution is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the West Arundecoit Central School District approve the consent agenda, which includes J1 through J9.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Steckley. Second, please.
Second.
Mr. Long, thank you. Okay, just a reminder to people at home that to make more efficient a use of meeting time, the Board of Education authorizes the use of consent agendas as part of our meeting agenda. As part of the consent agenda, a board member can ask the president of the board to have an item removed from consent agenda to have more discussion or clarification on a specific item in the agenda, or following that discussion, the board will vote on consent agenda. In addition, the board member may request we have an item removed from consent agenda in order to vote on that motion separately. So first of all, we'll have a discussion on the consent agenda. We have the motion on the table. I'll turn it over to Dr. Johnson to discuss the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. I do not have any specific comments at this time. We did have a code of conduct hearing previously. Mr. Brennan talked a little bit about the renewal project and the update related there. And so if there's any questions, I'll field those, but I don't have any specific comments. Thank you.
So most of the stuff the board has reviewed, has had time to review and ask questions and have comments received. But I will ask, is there any item on the agenda that a board member would like to have more discussion on separately? Okay, there's none being had. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a board member wishes to have removed and voted on separately? There's none had. Then we're going to go ahead and vote on consent agenda items J1 through J9. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly, 7-0. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is for board reports and future meetings. So we're going to go to future meetings, as there isn't no board reports this week. So go ahead, Ms. Kelly, with future meetings, please.
Our reorganizational meeting will be Wednesday, July 1, 5:30 p.m. at District Office, live and in-person, social distanced.
Okay, we're going to come back and have our first live meeting. We think it's important to do that for our reorganization meeting, so thank you. I would just remind the board, as of now, we have nothing for June 25th, in case we've had that on the calendar, in case Dr. Johnson needs to meet with the board one last time. At this time, Dr. Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong, we are not anticipating needing to meet next Thursday, but we're going to still hold that date.
Correct, Mr. Vay.
Okay, so we're going to have future meetings. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the executive session, but before I ask for a motion to go to executive session, as a board president, I'd just like to make one last statement. I want to thank the board this past year. This is most likely our last meeting as the Board of Education. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve as your president this past year. You've made this this year, while it's been challenging and frustrating at times, I can say it's been personally rewarding and exciting to work with all of you. You've been there in times when I know I've been able to call individual board members and ask for opinions or some support on when when I was having questions or something. So again, thank you for that. But also as the board president, I have the privilege and the honor to work with many of our district office staff. And I'll start with Dr. Johnson's office. Dr. Johnson, it has been a pleasure to work with you this past year. And I will always remember this year as my time on the board, not knowing what the future holds. So again, I would like to personally thank you for all your leadership, pushing my thoughts on different areas that we have had discussion on, and really improving my overall leadership and making me a better person. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vay.
And Ms. Kelly, I can't say enough. You are the person that keeps the board president on track. It's your knowledge of board operation and how things are to be run, or when we have to meet deadlines, that you make sure that, at least when I was there, that we were on time and things were clear. So again, thank you for your time, your patience with some of my questions, sometimes my last minute emails to you before a meeting. It does not go unnoticed, and you are what I would say is the pinnacle of that peak that other board clerks should aspire to emulate. So again, thank you for your service. And then to the rest of the district office staff, James, Chrissy, Karen, Dr. Hunter, Michelle, again, thank you for your time and effort that you give our students, the time that you take with the board to answer our questions, to make sure that we can make thoughtful, informed decisions for the students and community members of our district. That does not go unnoticed too. So again, I'm running a little long here, but I wanted to make sure that I had time to thank those people that have meant a lot to me this past year. And last of all, I'd like to thank my Vice President, Dave Long. He has been a pleasure to serve with, and I believe that it's been really an honor for me to be able to call him my Vice President. He was one that pushed me, kept me on track, and so again, Mr. Long, thank you for all you did this past year. Sorry about that, but I wanted to get that in, being our last meeting. So thank you, everybody. Okay, with that, we're going to have to move to executive session. Correct, Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, I ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss proposed pending litigation. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Metris. A second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Okay, we're going to move into executive session at, Ms. Kelly, I have 8:50, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to move to executive session. Thank you. We'll take a minute to allow people to drop off, and thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.